My name is Haley, and this year I turned 43. And when I say that number out loud, I can't quite believe that my life has already contained so much pain that some people don't experience in a century. Just 6 months ago, I was holding my husband David's hand in our bedroom, and his breathing grew fainter and fainter until one day it finally stopped, leaving behind a silence that still rings in my ears. 2 years of battling illness turned our days into a continuous ordeal, with no sleep or rest, only hospitals, medications, hopes, and disappointments. And every time I looked at him, the strong, once so confident man who was now losing weight and fading before my eyes, my heart sank so hard I thought it couldn't take it anymore. He was 58, 15 years older than me, and yet he always seemed like that mature, reliable man, the kind of man with whom I could be confident about the future and the challenges ahead. We met when I was just a girl, only 21, and back then I probably listened more to my heart than my head, because just a few months after we met, I said yes, and I've never regretted that decision. David was already successful by then. He had a business. He knew the value of money, and yet he appreciated simple things. A quiet evening at home, a walk by the water, my ridiculous attempt at cooking a complicated dish from a magazine recipe. Over the years, his fortune grew. We lived comfortably, but strangely enough, luxury didn't change him. He always remained a man who truly loved. When he fell ill, I quit without a second thought, because how could I leave him alone amid all those terrifying procedures, cold hospital rooms, and pain? Those 2 years were pure hell, and yet I never regretted choosing to be by his side until the very end, because he didn't leave alone, but holding my hand, and I hope that brought him at least some peace. After the funeral, I felt like I was living in a fog, and only then did I realize he'd left me so much. Too much for one person who now felt half empty. A large house in a quiet, leafy neighborhood where every window held the memory of our 15 years together. An apartment downtown that we rented out. A country house by the lake where he grilled steaks in the summer, and I fished with our son, Jake. 2 cars that he was obsessed with, and bills that totaled over $1.5 million. I decided to stay in our house because the walls still breathed his presence, because every corner reminded me of him, and to give it up would have been to give up on myself. The apartment downtown, the one we once bought for convenience, will go to Jake when he finishes his studies. He's 20 now, in his second year at university on the other side of the country, and I'm still amazed at how my boy grew into such a sensible and intelligent young man who chose engineering and was so proud that his father always said, "Jake has a good head on his shoulders." Sometimes I call him late at night when the silence becomes unbearable, and he listens patiently, though I understand it's difficult for him too. But I don't even want to hear about a new marriage, and frankly, I'm irritated by my friends' hints or my mother's cautious remarks, because David was the only one I loved so much that my insides still clench when I see his photograph, and the thought of looking for a replacement feels almost like a betrayal. But I decided that part of his legacy should serve something greater than just a comfortable life, so I made a donation to a foundation that supports cancer research, because if at least one person doesn't have to go through the hell we went through, then it wasn't in vain. I went back to work, but only part-time, more to distract my mind and somehow fill the days than for the money, because there's no longer any need for me. But even with this busyness, the evenings have become longer, and sitting alone in the empty house, I find myself thinking about David even more, as if the silence is deliberately pushing me back into memories. Until last week, everything was relatively calm, and I was starting to adjust to my new life until I got a call from my parents. I heard my mother's voice, soft, but with that special intonation when she says something important. "Haley, honey, we need to talk." And I knew right away that this would be more than just a conversation. Dad was also on speakerphone, and a few seconds later he added, "It's about Lisa." My heart sank, because my little sister had always been the family favorite, and I already knew this was going to be about something that would require me to be more than just the big sister. Lisa is getting married this spring, and my parents, without hesitation, told me they were counting on my help with the wedding. She's 33, 10 years younger than me, and she's always been the younger one. Spoiled, cheerful, and able to handle everything effortlessly. Help? What do you mean? I asked, though I already knew what was coming. Well, financially, Mom sighed. Weddings are so expensive these days, and she and Tom are just getting started. I paused, then exhaled. Okay, I'll call her myself and ask. And after hanging up, I immediately dialed Lisa. She answered so quickly, as if she'd been waiting for my call. Haley, oh my God, I'm so glad you called. The shrillness of her voice pierced my ears, but I tried to smile. Did Mom and Dad tell you about the wedding? I nodded to myself. Yes, they mentioned you might need some help. And then her excited plans began to pour out. Oh, I have such amazing ideas, she chattered. Tom and I want to have a grand ceremony at the Riverside Country Club. It's absolutely gorgeous. We're thinking of inviting about 200 guests for a full dinner. And I've fallen in love with this dress at the salon downtown. It costs about $3,000, but it's perfect. Just made for me. And of course, we're dreaming of inviting that band that played at Sarah's wedding last year. They're incredible, although, yes, a little pricey. I listened to her and felt something strange growing inside me, a mixture of fatigue, irritation, and a kind of quiet despair. I listened to her endless stream of words, pouring down the phone for over 20 minutes like a raging river after rain. It all flowed in. Flowers she imagined as delicate yet precious, a photographer she spoke of with such passion, as if her very happiness depended on his lens, a videographer, cars, jewelry, to-do lists, all of it adding up to an endless list of desires. While I, sitting on the edge of the sofa, mechanically noted each new detail, feeling a heaviness growing somewhere in my chest. When she finally paused and silence suddenly poured into my house, I managed, slightly closing my eyes, to mentally calculate at least a rough sum, and a shiver ran through me. Liza, that sounds wonderful, I said, choosing my words so as not to offend. But do you realize how much all this will cost? On the other end of the line, I heard her soft, almost laughing voice. Well, not exactly. I didn't count in detail, but that's exactly why I was hoping you could help. I mean, you have all this money now. There it was, I knew it would sound. And yet when she said it so openly, as if it were something perfectly natural, everything inside me sank. I took a deep breath and, trying to keep my voice even, said, Look, Lisa, I don't mind helping, really, but what you're describing would cost at least $100,000, maybe more. It's just unrealistic. She didn't lose her composure. On the contrary, almost with offense in her voice, she countered, But Haley, you can afford it. David left you so much. I closed my eyes and curled my fingers in my lap. That's not the point, I said firmly. A wedding shouldn't cost more than a down payment on a house. There was silence on the other end, and I could almost hear her breathing. A minute later, she asked, more coldly than before, So how much are you willing to give me? I paused, mentally going over the options, and finally said, $50,000. That will be my wedding gift to you. The rest should go to you and Tom, his parents, or our mom and dad. $50,000 is generous, Lisa. Most people pay for their own weddings. There was no joy in her voice, but I heard a hesitant, thank you. And the call ended so abruptly that I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone in my hands, as if waiting for something to continue. The next day, I went to the bank and opened a separate account, transferred exactly $50,000, and registered Lisa as an authorized user. I wanted everything to be clear, transparent, and without misunderstandings. Sunday dinner at my parents' confirmed my suspicions that the conversation wasn't over yet. Lisa came with Tom, her fiancé, and he seemed like a nice enough guy. Modest, quiet, working in IT, but there was a certain wariness in his eyes, as if he hadn't yet fully realized what he'd gotten himself into. Once we were all seated at the table and Mom brought out her signature meat pie, I decided to cut to the chase and said, Lisa, I want to let everyone know that I've wired $50,000 into the account for your wedding. It's my gift to you and Tom. Mom and Dad exchanged glances as if they were exchanging a silent reproach. Lisa merely nodded, showing neither joy nor gratitude, as if the amount hadn't impressed her. Tom, on the other hand, looked stunned, and from his expression, I could tell Lisa hadn't even told him exactly how much I was willing to contribute. "That's very generous, Haley," Dad said, but his voice held a tone as if he'd expected more from me. I looked straight at him and firmly repeated, "That's generous. Most people don't get that kind of help at all." After that, the conversation drifted unnoticed to other topics, but the tension hung in the air. Lisa picked at her food with her fork, avoiding my gaze, and my mother kept shooting me looks of disappointment, and I felt bitter that even after taking such a step, I still seemed stingy in their eyes. But I knew $50,000 was more than enough for a nice wedding, and if they wanted something more grandiose, they would have to find a way to pay for it themselves. In the following weeks, life seemed to return to normal. I focused again on my job, where I spent 20 hours a week marketing eco-friendly cleaning products. Not stressful, but quite interesting. And my boss, Jennifer, was always understanding, allowing me flexibility in my work schedule, considering my personal situation. I still attended my charity's meetings twice a week, and these meetings helped me feel like I was doing something meaningful. The happiest moments of the week were the calls from Jake. He'd tell me about lectures, about his roommate's strange habits, about the girl he liked but never had the courage to approach. I laughed, encouraged him, and in those moments I felt like I still had something to live for, that life went on, even if its main light had gone out. Working at the Cancer Foundation became perhaps the most important thing in my life after David's passing, because it was there that I felt I could somehow give meaning to the pain that seemed to never fully leave me. We raised money for research, for new drugs, and also helped families pay the bills that always arrived relentlessly and late. And every time I signed a check or stood at yet another fundraising event, I mentally talked to David and thought that if even one family escaped the hell we went through, then his suffering was not in vain. So, on Tuesday morning, as I was pouring myself a coffee and trying to sort through my email, my gaze fell on an email from Lisa. And in that moment, my stomach sank so hard I almost spilled my cup, because the subject line was short but utterly eloquent. Wedding gift list. I sat there, staring blankly at the screen for almost a minute, because only one thought was running through my head. I'd already given her my gift, $50,000, and that should have been more than enough, so what more could she want? But curiosity overcame my irritation, and I finally opened the email. As I started reading, my coffee choked in my throat, because the list seemed like a mockery. Only 5 items, but each one more absurd than the last. An apartment in the city center, a Porsche, David's car, our country house, a gold Rolex watch that David had worn for 20 years, and a 2-week honeymoon to the Maldives. I reread the letter 3 times, hoping I'd misunderstood it, that it was some kind of ridiculous prank. But no, the point was precisely that my little sister was literally asking me for gifts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The apartment alone was worth $500,000. The country house was even more expensive. And the watch, the very watch I'd once planned to give to Jake so he'd have a living memory of his father, she wanted to keep for herself, as if it were just a shiny accessory. I sat there staring at the screen, feeling the heat spread through my body, the blood pressure rising so quickly that my temples began to pound. Everything inside me screamed. Call her right now, vent, yell, ask her how she had the nerve. But I knew perfectly well how such a conversation would go. She would start crying, sobbing, saying that she has nothing, that she cannot afford anything good, and in an hour my parents would call me, accusing me of being cruel and heartless towards my little sister. That letter brought back a wave of memories I'd been carefully avoiding, but now they came flooding back. I was 10 when Lisa was born, and instead of being a normal child, I became her nanny, because Mom was always tired, Dad was always at work, and guess who carried the baby, warmed bottles and changed diapers while the other kids played in the yard? Yes, me. When I turned 16 and got a job at a grocery store, my salary didn't go toward my teenage dreams, but toward helping around the house and Lisa's endless needs. She always needed new clothes, school supplies, clubs, dance classes, piano lessons. All of it fell on my shoulders. I was grateful that I managed to go to college on a full scholarship, but I still worked part-time and sent money home, even when I couldn't afford books myself. My mom would call and say, "Lisa needs this," and I'd save up, scramble for every penny, just so my sister could have everything. And when I met David and we got married, I organized and paid for the entire wedding myself because my parents didn't contribute a cent. I remember my mom saying, "Well, David has money. You don't need our help," as if the very fact of his success automatically made him obligated to pay for everything and everyone. Then, when I was 24, Jake was born. And here's another question for you. Did 14-year-old Lisa ever offer to babysit her nephew so I could sleep or at least take a shower? Number. Did my parents help with their grandson? Hardly. I was left alone with a newborn, learning to be a mother on the fly while David was traveling on business. And when Lisa went to college, guess who paid for her education? Me. Year after year, writing checks while she studied art history and enjoyed her weekends, I carried her like I had as a child, and no one even thought to ask if it wasn't too much for me. After Lisa graduated from university, I remember taking on her responsibilities again, paying the rent on her first apartment for 6 months until she deigned to find a job. At the time, I thought it was temporary, that once she got on her feet, she would be in charge of her own life. But looking back, I see that I instilled in her this insatiability, this habit of taking and demanding more and more without giving anything in return. And now she'd sent me a letter asking for not just some trivial thing, but my house, my car, my husband's watch, and a vacation worth more than most people earn in a year. I sat there, staring at the screen, replaying memories in my head, from sleepless nights with her cradle to the checks I'd signed for her education and entertainment, and felt the past strangling me like an iron fist. I couldn't immediately respond or delete the letter, and for another 30 minutes I stared at the screen, my heart pounding while anger and fatigue warred within me. Finally, I decided to be reasonable, even though every cell in my body was screaming at me to just tell her to go to hell. I reread the list again, and realizing that the house, the watch, and the car were out of the question, I chose the cheapest of her insane demands, a trip to the Maldives. I calculated in my mind, 2 weeks at a decent resort would cost me around $18,000. Still an absurd amount for a gift, but at least nothing compared to the hundreds of thousands she was trying to squeeze out of me. I sat down and wrote her a short, restrained reply. "Lisa, I already gave you $50,000 for your wedding. That was my gift. But I'm willing to pay for your honeymoon to the Maldives. This is my final offer." I hit send and closed my laptop, trying to convince myself that the conversation was over. But only 10 minutes had passed when my phone vibrated, a new email. I opened it and was nearly speechless. "It doesn't work like that, Haley. I need all of these things, not just one. You have so much, and I have nothing. Choose all 5, or don't bother." I sat in absolute silence, reading her words over and over, unable to believe she was serious. Her audacity took my breath away. She literally expected me to give her half of everything David left me and our son, and then pay for her luxury vacation, as if I were some kind of bank or wish fulfillment fund. At that moment, I grabbed the phone and dialed her number. She answered on the second ring, and I couldn't help but scream, "What the hell is wrong with you, Lisa? Do you even realize you're asking for hundreds of thousands of dollars in gifts? Do you realize how insane this is?" "It's not crazy," she retorted, and I heard a defensive note creep into her voice, as if she'd already been preparing her own justification. "You just have it all lying around. David left you the apartment, the country house, the cars, the watches, and the money. Why do you need all this? You said yourself you'd never marry again." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice even though inside I was seething. "I have a son, Lisa. Your nephew. I plan for him to get the apartment when he graduates. I want to leave him one of the cars, too. And yes, I'm going to give Jake my father's watch because it's his keepsake. But Haley, I'm getting married, she drawled pitifully, almost petulantly, and it should be the happiest time of my life, but I can't afford anything nice. I couldn't resist replying sharply, for $50,000 you can afford a lot, and if that's not enough, figure out how to get the rest yourself. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and for a second I thought my words had gotten through. But then her voice changed, becoming cold and hard. Fine. Either you give me all 5 items on the list or don't come to my wedding. I froze, not believing my ears. Are you seriously giving me an ultimatum? I'm just telling it like it is, she said without even flinching. Give me what I want or you won't be welcome at my wedding. I almost whispered, Lisa, do you remember that I'm paying for your wedding? And then she laughed. A real ringing laugh that made my insides go cold. It's not even your money, Haley. You didn't deserve any of this. You're just lucky your sick husband died and left you everything. The least you can do is share it with your family and not act like a selfish jerk. I hung up and sat motionless, feeling my whole body tremble as if I'd been electrocuted. For 5 minutes, I couldn't collect my thoughts. Couldn't believe my own sister had just said such things about David, the man who fought until his last breath and who meant everything to me. Calling him my sick husband and telling me I was lucky because he died. It wasn't just cruel, it was unforgivable. And I knew I could never forgive her for it. David was a real man. Honest, kind, generous. He fought cancer with all his might. He didn't give up even when the doctors shook their heads, and he definitely didn't deserve anyone, especially my sister, to talk about him like that. I grabbed my phone, my fingers shaking, but I opened my banking app and in just a couple of minutes cut off Lisa's access to the wedding account. My heart was pounding as if I were committing a crime, but inside, I felt not relief, but cold determination. Then I went further. I canceled all the deposits she had made. Venue, catering, florist, photographer. Each transaction vanished one by one until the screen showed zeros. And in that moment, I realized control was back in my hands. After finishing my banking, I turned off my phone completely because I knew Lisa and then my parents would start calling me in a few minutes, and I didn't want to deal with it right now, while the storm was still raging inside me. I went out into the garden, the same garden David and I planted 3 years ago, and every flower, every bush held a piece of his caring hands. Working in the soil always helped me think more clearly, and I spent the entire evening on my knees, pulling weeds, watering plants, feeling the earth beneath my fingers soothe me more than any pill. I talked to David in my mind as if he were still there, asking him to help me not go crazy from this pain. The next morning, I finally turned on my phone and almost dropped it from the number of notifications. 37 missed calls, 28 messages, all in one night. Most of them were from Lisa, of course, but a few were from my parents. I started reading her messages, and my hair stood on end. First, she was hysterical about the call from the wedding planner, who informed her about the canceled deposits. Then, when she realized I had blocked her access to the account, her words became increasingly angry and demanding. Haley, you need to give me back access immediately. This is my wedding money. You can't just take it away. Mom and Dad will hear about this. You're vindictive, and you know it. My parents' messages weren't much better. Mom demanded I call her immediately. Dad wrote that I was being unreasonable, that the family needs to stick together. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and simply deleted everything without replying to a single message. I didn't have the energy to explain the same things over and over again. I had an important meeting at the Cancer Foundation that day, and I was determined not to let this family drama poison what really mattered. My phone continued to vibrate all day, but I didn't pick it up, as if it were a weapon ready to fire a cannonball of pain at me. By evening, the vibrations had subsided, and I thought they'd finally realized I wasn't going to talk to them. But I was wrong. At precisely 7 o'clock that evening, I heard the sound of cars pulling into the driveway. My heart sank. I looked out the window and saw familiar silhouettes, my parents' car and Lisa's. A big family gathering flashed through my mind. They didn't even knock. Lisa simply opened the door with her old key, one she had from her days as a housekeeper, and burst inside, her face blazing with anger. "Haley!" she screamed as soon as she saw me. "What the hell are you doing?" Her parents followed her into the house, and I immediately knew they were on her side. Their faces were red with rage, their eyes blazing. "Haley Elizabeth," my mother said my full name in the tone she always used when she wanted to put me in my place, as if I were still a little girl. "You need to fix this right now." "Fix what?" I asked, trying to sound calm, though inside I was seething. "You know perfectly well what," Lisa interjected. "Give me back access to my account." "My wedding is in 3 months, and you just ruined everything." I raised my head, looked her straight in the eye, and said, "I didn't ruin anything." "You ruined everything the moment you decided to insult my late husband." "I didn't insult him," Lisa cried, but her eyes briefly betrayed confusion. "You called him my sick husband and said I was lucky he was dead," I reminded her, feeling a lump in my throat. Lisa hesitated, lowering her gaze for a second as if ashamed, but a moment later she straightened up again, folding her arms across her chest and assuming a defensive stance. I stood in the middle of my living room, feeling my legs buckle from exhaustion and despair, yet simultaneously burning inside, unable to believe that all this was actually happening, that my own family was saying such things to me and demanding the impossible. I was heartbroken, and my parents looked at me as if I wasn't the daughter who had always helped, always been there, but some heartless stranger. "You were being unreasonable," my mother said with a heavy sigh, as if she were giving me a grade, and at that moment I wanted to scream at them for losing their minds. "So, you know about the gift list?" I asked, my voice shaking, not from fear, but from the hurt and rage that washed over me like a wave. My mother nodded confidently, even with a hint of pride. "Of course we know." I helped her write it. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "You helped her?" I repeated, my brain refusing to process what I'd heard. But my mother was already continuing her speech, as if it all went without saying. "Haley, you've lived well all these years. David has always taken care of you. You've wanted for nothing. Now it's Lisa's turn. As her older sister, you have a responsibility to help her." "My responsibility?" I blurted out, my voice no longer trembling, but sharp as a knife. "Yes," Dad interjected, raising his palm as if sealing Mom's words. "Lisa deserves a beautiful wedding and a good start in life. You have more than enough to share." I looked at the three of them, Lisa wiping away tears and playing the victim, Mom with her cool confidence, and Dad, always quiet but suddenly firm in that moment. And everything inside me screamed. They stood in my living room, in the house David and I had spent 15 years building and filling with love, demanding that I give them everything that was left of him, everything he'd worked for his entire life. "Get out!" I screamed so loudly I scared the sound of my own voice. "I won't give Lisa a dime. I won't give her back her account, and I won't come to this stupid wedding." Lisa immediately burst into tears, sobbing and clutching at my mother. "You're just jealous because I'm getting married and you'll be alone forever." "That's enough," I said, gritting my teeth. "Everyone get out of my house immediately or I'll call the police." "You wouldn't dare," Dad said defiantly, but I had already grabbed the phone and started dialing 911. They exchanged glances, and I saw a shadow of doubt cross their faces. Then the three of them reluctantly walked out the door. I closed it and leaned my forehead against the cold wood, breathing heavily, but I knew this wasn't over yet. Indeed, over the next 2 weeks, it was as if they had raised an army against me. One after another, my aunts, uncles, and cousins started calling me, each with the same message. I was being selfish, I had to help my sister, family came first. I tried to explain the situation to my Aunt Carol, with whom I had always been especially close, as she had often supported me during difficult times, but even she sided with Lisa. "Haley, honey, I know Lisa can be a little demanding, but she was always the youngest in the family, and now you have all this money," she said in her soft voice, which suddenly seemed foreign to me. "Carol," I replied. "She asked me to give her my house and my car." Would you give her your house? My aunt hesitated. Well, no, of course not, but your situation is completely different. I realized there was no point in fighting it any longer, and I stopped answering calls whenever I saw familiar numbers. It was as if I'd erected a wall between myself and all this pressure, even though my heart ached with betrayal. And then something happened that completely unsettled me. Jake called me, and I could immediately tell he was upset. His voice was shaking. "Mom, Grandma called me." I clutched the phone. "What did she say?" He sighed. "She said that if I don't convince you to help Aunt Lisa with her wedding, she'll disown me. She said I won't be invited to any more family gatherings and that she won't help me pay for college." I could practically see red before my eyes. "Jake, listen to me very carefully," I said firmly. "Your grandmother isn't paying for your education. I am. And she has no right to drag you into this mess." And then, for the first time, I told him everything. About Lisa's ridiculous gift list, about her words about David, and about how her parents had helped her put it together. Jake listened silently without interrupting once, and when I finished, he paused for a minute. Then he said something that made my heart ache and brought tears to my eyes. "Mom, if they're willing to give me up just because you won't give Aunt Lisa a house and a car, then maybe I don't want anything to do with them at all." In that moment, I felt so proud of my son that I could hardly breathe. At 20, he possessed a wisdom and strength that the rest of our family combined lacked. "I love you, Jake," I said, my voice shaking no longer with anger, but with happiness. "I love you too, Mom, and if anything, I think Dad would be proud of you for standing up for yourself." After that conversation, for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of relief, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. At least I had one person, the one most important person in my life, who saw everything as I did and understood what was really going on. After that, 3 months truly flew by as if blown away by the wind, and I was almost surprised at how much easier it was to breathe when you no longer had to bear the weight of other people's demands and constant complaints. I threw myself into my work and my charity work because that's where I felt like I was doing something truly important and necessary, not just submitting to other people's whims. The Cancer Foundation was planning a grand charity event, and I volunteered to help organize it, pouring my heart into every detail, from the music selection to the decorations. All this busyness not only distracted me, but also gave me a sense of empowerment, as if I was once again in control of my life, not just a plaything in the hands of my relatives. Jake and I talked every week, sometimes even twice, and these calls were a true salvation for me. I listened to his voice and realized that it was for this boy, now a man, that I was holding on. He was an excellent student, and I grew prouder of him with each new story of his successes. One day, he confided that he had finally worked up the courage to ask a girl he'd long liked out on a date, and they went to a screening of old movies at the university together. He told me about it with such enthusiasm that I could literally hear him glowing with happiness, and my heart filled with joy for him, because it's small steps like these that make life beautiful. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked one day, and I paused for a second, his concern moving me to tears. "Yes, honey, I'm fine," I replied. He clarified, "I mean after everything that happened with Grandma and Aunt Lisa." I sighed. It was really painful at first, but now I really feel better. I feel freer, because I no longer have to endure their constant demands and endless reproaches. My family stopped calling after about a month. Perhaps they finally realized I wasn't going to change my mind, or maybe they'd simply found a new target for pressure. But whatever the case, my phone became noticeably quieter, and frankly, I actually liked it that way. One evening in early May, I was sitting with a cup of tea, idly scrolling through Facebook, when I suddenly came across wedding photos posted by my cousin, who, apparently, had attended Lisa's wedding. I knew I probably shouldn't have looked at them, since I wouldn't find anything good there, but curiosity got the better of me. It turned out the wedding was taking place right in the backyard of my parents' house. There was a small white tent there, big enough for about 30 people, and everything looked quite modest, almost homey. Lisa was wearing a simple dress, a far cry from the $3,000 designer, one she'd originally chosen and insisted on paying for. The flowers were clearly bought at a nearby grocery store, and instead of a trendy band, some cousin was on stage, strumming an acoustic guitar. But most surprisingly, all this simplicity was actually quite sweet and touching. And if Lisa hadn't been so greedy and demanding from the start, if she'd appreciated at least what she had, I would have gladly paid for a similar, intimate wedding, and we would all have had the energy and money to make it a little more elegant, yet still cozy and heartfelt. But she chose this path herself. Instead of a beautiful celebration, she wanted a mansion, cars, and a luxurious vacation. And in the end, she was left with neither gratitude nor support. In the photographs, I noticed Tom, her new husband, and to my surprise, he looked genuinely happy. He had a warm smile, and his eyes sparkled with love, and I caught myself thinking that maybe he really was a good guy. I hoped he wasn't aware of all the dirty drama Lisa had unleashed, and that he would manage to maintain the purity of his soul around her. Maybe they really were right for each other, and perhaps with him she would have a chance to learn something. That summer became the brightest time in many years for me. I spent weekends at our country house with David, sitting by the lake with a book, listening to the lapping of the water and the singing of the birds, tending the garden we had once lovingly planted together. I felt like I was finding peace again. On weekends, I started going to the spa with my work friends, where we laughed, relaxed, and allowed ourselves to simply be happy women. I also signed up for a pottery class, and to my surprise, quickly became proficient. I was fascinated by the process of seeing clay come to life in your hands and transform into a vase or a cup. And there was something healing about these activities. Then in August, something I never expected happened. I received a text message from an unknown number. "Hi, Haley. This is Tom. I hope you don't mind me texting you. I got your number from Lisa's phone. I wanted to reach out to you because I feel like there's some misunderstanding in the family that maybe we could resolve." I stared at the message for a while, unsure how to respond. On the one hand, I sensed he genuinely wanted to understand, but on the other, I knew he was caught up in something he didn't fully understand. Finally, I replied, "Hi, Tom. I appreciate you contacting me, but there's no misunderstanding. Lisa knows exactly what she did. I hope you're happy together." He never responded after that, and I found myself feeling a little sorry for him. He was probably trying to fix something he hadn't fully grasped, but it wasn't my job to explain his wife's actions to him or try to fix a relationship she'd ruined. My son turned 21 in September, and I'd decided early on that I wouldn't just go to college for the weekend to celebrate, but I'd do something I'd long planned. I'd give him David's car, his Porsche, the one he adored and always called his Sunday best friend. We had dinner at a nice restaurant, ordering everything he loved, from his favorite steak to chocolate dessert, and as we were drawing to a close, I pulled out my keys and handed them to him. He froze, looking at them, as if he couldn't believe it was happening. "Mom, are you sure?" he asked, his voice breaking, and I saw his hands tremble slightly. "It's Daddy's car." I smiled, trying to contain all the emotions rushing through me, and quietly replied, "Your father wanted it to be yours. He told me so back when he felt he couldn't drive anymore. This is his gift to you, just through my hands." Jake's eyes welled up with tears, and he turned away for a second to wipe them away. "I miss him," he whispered. "I miss him too, darling, every day. But he would be so proud of you, proud of the person you're becoming," I replied. And in that moment, an invisible thread from David seemed to flow between us, as if he were sitting with us at this table. We spent the rest of the weekend together. Jake showed me around campus, introducing me to his friends, and I saw how much they respected him, how they valued his humor and listening skills, and it warmed me, as if I were seeing David again, only in the younger face of our son. Watching him in his element, I suddenly realized that this is what matters. Not endless dramas with ungrateful relatives, but these moments of true intimacy, these connections based on love and respect. As I drove home after that weekend, everything became crystal clear. The $50,000 I once set aside for Lisa's wedding, the very ones she dismissively threw in my face, I decided to use where they would truly make a difference. I'll donate to the Cancer Foundation, where every penny goes to help those going through the same hell that David and I had to endure. The following week, I made the donation. The foundation's director called me personally to thank me and said the funds would form the basis of a new support program for people caring for sick loved ones. When I heard this, my eyes stung. This was exactly what I wanted, to transform grief into help, pain into light. 6 months had passed since Lisa's wedding. In that time, I hadn't received a single call, a single greeting card, or even a casual message from anyone in my family. No birthday wishes, no holiday invitations. And you know what? I was perfectly fine with that. I had a son who loved and respected me. I had friends who valued me not for what I could give them, but for who I was. I had a job that brought meaning and changed the world for the better. I had memories of David and the wonderful life we built together. But most importantly, I had self-respect. I didn't let anyone force me to give up what David had worked so hard to leave for Jake and me. I didn't bend to their whims, I didn't support bad behavior, and I didn't let anyone think their greed was okay. Sometimes people ask me if I regret the way my relationship with my family turned out. And I always answer, no. I only regret that they showed me their true colors. But I don't regret standing up for myself. Lisa made her choice when she decided that humiliating my late husband's memory was an acceptable way to get what she wanted. My parents made theirs when they decided to side with her and support her demands instead of admitting how wrong she was. And I made mine. I chose dignity over clinging to the illusion of family peace. I chose self-respect over becoming a doormat once again. I chose to honor David's memory and protect his name from slander. And now I know for sure it was the only right choice.